1 Corinthians 15, we're picking up in verse 58. This verse is, as you would probably guess, the culmination of the chapter. And I think sometimes that we forget that when we quote it or refer to it. It seems to have an emphasis so strong, and when I will refer to it, and we'll go ahead and read it. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. It is a strong exhortation. It's powerful in meaning. It builds up. It's emotional. And yet, within the context, to fully understand and appreciate it, we must make sure that we understand and consider the impact of the word therefore. That this is drawing a conclusion. It's a wherefore, in many places the same word, but it is going back and saying, as this be the case, this also. And so, in a chapter that's been dedicated to demonstrating the reality of the resurrection, here at the end is the big implication of all that has been said through the chapter. And we need to appreciate it because it wasn't just an exhortation about work that we're going to see. It's also the why we work, and that the work is built on something, and that the power of resurrection should motivate the work. So all of these things are intertwined that we often do not actually put together and consider. We keep them separate. But Paul put them together. That what he saw that was needed in Corinth was a perspective to go back and say, here is why we do what we do. And if we pull out that core meaning, then we've actually eliminated all the good, strong reasons to be active. And as something, if you'll think about, if you will with me, go back to chapter 13, where he talks about love there. Right in between, he's in an overall context of chapters 12 through 14, and he's dealing with the miraculous. He talks about the oneness of the miraculous, all the different types of gifts and how they're designed to work together toward unity in chapter 12. In chapter 14, he's laying out how these gifts play out in practicality within the assembly. But in chapter 13, he comes down and he says, but they need to be motivated by love. And in this instance, he has provided the motivation of the resurrection and this reality as a core idea and doctrinal foundation for work. So what he did before in saying you've got to go back to have the motivation of love in carrying out and using what's been provided you, here he provided the motivation of resurrection first, both the resurrection of Jesus and our own, so both sides of it. What Jesus did for us and what that means is possible for us. And in the middle of that should be work. So in both cases, it just depends on what you're emphasizing. But we always need to make sure that we do not go too far in separating the biblical activity and doctrine from its proper motivations, or go so far as we talking about motivations without the corresponding doctrine that's associated with it. That all these should be integrated into who we are. Otherwise, we become a people who feel the right way and do the wrong things, or we become a people who are doing the right things, but not really for the right reasons. Neither one of those is a good situation. And Scripture addresses that by showing us how to integrate it. So that's the basis upon which I want us to consider this text. I don't want us to forget that he's been talking about Jesus died for you and he's been victorious. And he's coming back. He just came back to that in verse 57. He won so you could win. And that means then, he's saying, but part of winning is working in the kingdom. So let's read again 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 58. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. We discussed the therefore, putting it in the context, culmination of this discussion about the resurrection. Is it's not just, shouldn't just be something, oh, that's nice. It should motivate you to act and to do and to be a particular way. But before he gets to his exhortations, he says, my beloved brethren. Now, why might that have particular impact, or what was the intended impact, do we think? Because he chose to do that here. What does that communicate? Let's start with that. What do those simple words, my beloved brethren, communicate? Say it again. Okay. So you're dealing with it's personal, right? It's family. That we're coming together, and therefore it goes back and should make us think about who our Father is that makes us that family. And then he says, my is the personal part. Here's how I see you. But then he says, beloved, because there are different times he'll just say, my brethren. But he wants to add this, my beloved brethren. Now, does that mean, what is that? If you're talking about, I'm calling you beloved, my beloved brethren. What is he trying to say? What is he's saying, explain his motivation for what he's about to say or what he has been saying. Okay. He's endearing himself to them, but it's by expressing feelings toward them. Now, there's a lesson itself that it's hard to have feelings and develop feelings if you never express feelings. Right? My beloved brethren. That's not quite the same as hey dude. Okay? Communicate very different things. They both communicate. Says we're kind of on a mutual kind of path. We got a background. It also says we're probably of the same generation. But my beloved brethren says we're part of the same family. And I personally have thought about this and care for you. Now go back and take a look at what he's been saying. You'd think, why would that be a hard thing to communicate or needful thing to communicate? He's been talking about Jesus' resurrection. He's been talking about their potential resurrection. Tracy? Okay. Okay, good. Thank you. It's a reminder that he, including in this chapter, right in the middle of it, he still had to come down on them, didn't he? Awake to righteousness, people. Right? See, he didn't put that in because he was saving up. My beloved brethren. But he wanted to wait till he could cover that because he wanted them to feel the impact of you've got to change some things. But he comes down and says, all of these things I've been telling you is because you're my family. It's what allows him contextually to both be straightforward and stern and be loving simultaneously, or at least within the context of the book, is because both are present with him. Both. And that's what's important, because if we're just stern, the relationship isn't strong enough to carry on with us and to cause us to care about it. if we're just going to be, hey, we're just brethren here, but we never have to be confronted with things, then we don't change because we don't feel it's necessary, because I get all the relationship, that doesn't ever go away. But it's the combination of them that put them together and say, no, being in a situation where I need to address me and get myself right with God is important in my relationship. And to be able to express that, Paul is emphasizing, he was wanting them to know, never doubt where he came from on this was the right place. And they needed to hear that. And so he's also about to tell them more they need to do. Isn't it helpful to be reminded that people care before you tell them something they need to change? Yeah. I won't tell you the whole story how, but in this particular class, it's kind of become a thing that in homiletics, when they have to give a critique of one another in class, part of the training is to help one another out. It kind of started with this group where they'll start with, "You know I love you, right?" And then, wham! There it comes. Okay? I'm just saying that's very biblical. Okay? Is that the reassurance that we're brothers, we care. I'm saying this because it's needed, and I care, and I want to help you. Now, those have to be more than words, though, right? It has to be backed up with the rest of the relationship. And that's what Paul is doing. Therefore, my beloved brethren, here's the first one. Be steadfast. What does it mean to be steadfast? Faithful? Well, he's going to come around to other aspects of faith. But yes. What is the core idea, though? You get this word means firm. So it kind of depends on what you're firm about, though, right? Okay. Now, put this, whenever you come around to these things, remember other things that he's had to tell them. If he's telling them they need to be firm, then what does that indicate that they have been? Kind of wobbly. All right? A little bit shaky on things. Did you catch that Margaret Thatcher reference? Okay. And don't go wobbly. That's what he's telling them. Don't go wobbly. You need to be steadfast, firm. Because he said, you've kind of been shaky on these things. Because they were giving up some things they'd been taught. He says, you need to be firm, and you're right that it's about faithfulness, but it's the core idea behind faithfulness is that, boy, you can let little light breeze come over and knock you over. We've seen a lot of weather, if you pay attention to those things, you see some of these 80-mile-per-hour winds that have been coming through and the trees bending over, and you think about some that have gone through that and just falling over. Well, that'd be really sad if all it took was about a 10-mile-per-hour breeze and a tree just falls. It says, don't be wobbly. Don't be so where you can be pushed around doctrinally or practically in life to where you just kind of wander around. That's what Paul's talking about in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15. Okay? And so you come through and it says, you need to be firm. Now here comes the harder part. Where is the difference then between being firm and being stubborn? Okay, good. Good. Stubborn is that I am content with wherever I am, and it's about a will that is immovable, rather than a recognition of that I've got a center from God that's immovable. And this is actually really important, because sometimes we don't appreciate the difference between where I am because of God, what He requires, and that's where I've got to stay, versus I've got to kind of put my roots down, but it's maybe in something else or a few ideas over here, that's not going to work. And that's partly what the Corinthians had fallen into. says you need to be steadfast, firm with what you've been taught by Paul. Don't give up so easily about what Scripture has to say. He then moves on with that and he says, immovable. Okay? So the one is the firm. Okay? Now we're coming down specifically, this kind of the preparation stage. The next is immovable, which you look at the background of this particular word is a word where we get kinetic energy, which means it's emotion. That's the root of this word, to the point of change. Meta. And then he says, and then it puts what's called an alpha primitive that says no. No to that. No to letting yourself just kind of be changed with the motion. To be pushed around. To be going with the flow. Okay? And just kind of drifting along. As you've got to be somewhere where you know where, and that you're not easily kind of let all these other things shift you. Okay? So he says you've got to have that quality. And it's interesting that he puts these two, which are clearly related, right? Be firm in regard to core who you are, and immovable in regard to what all is around you. Okay? You've got to take care of you first. Those are matters of faith, doctrine, belief. And then he goes on and he says, always abounding in the work of the Lord. What does it mean to abound? To be full, I like that. Say it again, John. Going the extra mile. I'm going to put those together. It's the concept, if you will, you're filling up a pitcher, okay? And you fill that pitcher up, and you're looking, now if you've got to carry that pitcher, what are you typically going to do? You're going to leave some room. That's right. I've got to move this around. He's saying that when you fill this particular pitcher of what he's talking about, it needs to not only be filled up to the brim, but keep on filling. Where it's always, so it's kind of like carrying it with you to make sure that as you move and what you're doing, it's always full. That's actually very important here because of what he is talking about, abounding in the work of the Lord. So I want us to consider what can happen very easily when you're involved in the work of the Lord. We'll talk about that more specifically. We're going to assume you know generally what that's talking about. You ever get tired in the work? Is it understandable to get tired even when it's the work of the Lord? Can you end up doing things where you just kind of run out of steam and you just can't go any further? It could be that Bible class that you've been teaching for 38 years, Keep going and going. Could be you've been dealing with this part, and that's just you, and that's always what you do. Okay? But the idea of abounding in it, though, is by using a word that says always being full. If there's a responsibility to it. And the responsibility is found in doing the things it takes to be refueled so that you can keep up the work. If you're abounding in the work, again, that whole idea of constantly, I brought the idea of you traveling that hose, you just keep putting stuff in even as you move around. Because normally for us, You fill it up. You don't go all the way to the top. Don't want to waste any, spill out. So then we head off and we pour up and we empty out, and then we come back. Now we fill up. We're taking a break. He's given us the idea that we need to get better, and that's at filling up all the time. And that's part of what this idea is of what it takes to be firm and to be immovable, are the preparation stages if you're going to be able to abound. And that doesn't mean, don't misunderstand, that doesn't mean that there's a requirement that you have to teach that class for 38 years straight. It does mean, though, that there's a responsibility to be active and participating in the work as a whole, and that you have to fuel that. The abounding implies the need to fuel that. But what kind of fuel do you need to participate in the work of the Lord? It's one thing for me to just tell you that. Keep on going. You need, encouragement. Emotional fuel. You have to have emotional fuel. What else? You have to have spiritual fuel, which is to say you need a good, strong relationship yourself, not just about knowledge, but your life needs to be there. So, because otherwise the contradictions get to you, and it's just too much. You don't have the spiritual strength to keep going because you haven't been working on you. So you've got to work on you if you're going to work for the Lord. Okay. What else? Say it again. Okay, you have to be prayed up. Okay, it takes a lot of. That's part of your relationship. Okay, but notice that what you're dealing. It's both. There's an intellectual aspect of this. There's a spiritual aspect of this. There's an emotional aspect of this, and you cannot simply neglect any one of them if you're going to be busy in the Lord's work. And then we have to realize when we get to that point, we need to be thinking about what part of that needs the right fuel. Where am I not getting the right fuel to take care of this so we can actually provide that? And as a congregation, what can we do to make sure that all those workers, because sometimes we just take it for granted that, well, they're working, they're doing fine because they're working. No, that doesn't necessarily happen. Sometimes the work becomes too much. So you've got to figure out does it take, because you've got to figure out what the problems are that are fuel depletion. Okay, I feel like I'm talking logistics in the Army. Okay, but I am in a way. He's talking about this for the Lord's army. It takes that kind of thing. There has to be strong motivation. Motivation requires emotional fuel. Okay, supplied in some way, and it can't just be a pat on the back. Here you go. It's reasons why we do this. Motivation, it comes from reasons why, not attaboys. Attaboys are good. Reasons why are what keep things going. Okay? And so you've got to combine those things. Spiritually, you have to both have spiritual knowledge, but you also have to have the spiritual application of life in your relationship with God and have that be your identity, not just something you do. Intellectually, we have to have thought through things so that we're thinking about how these apply, and I can apply the emotion. I'm not just going all around, and I'm not just taking things and saying, oh, I feel spiritual because this. It needs to have the right information, so I'm doing the right things the right way. And so I have to be working on these things. So we have to work with one another to help, because it's going to be rare that we're just going to all stay topped off right on the tank all the time, and all those. Be pretty hard. Brock? Mm-hmm. Okay, good. That's very good. Yes, yeah, you've both got to realize it, right? The alertness. But I like the idea of what you talked about Robert's lesson about the muscle memory by doing it. And that actually takes, It takes responsibility off. When you're learning some new skill, it's a lot harder, isn't it? You know, that's why when you're learning to drive, everything is kind of one too many things to kind of put together. And that's why when you're first starting to drive, you look in the rearview mirror and all of a sudden you're in the other lane. You can only do one thing at a time. Well, that's not good for long term. I see some of y'all been there. Okay. And you're trying to do that. Okay. One thing at a time. But then after you drive for long enough, your car just automatically goes to Sonic. Okay, well, maybe that's just my personal experience. Okay, so, but you just do that. Okay, you don't have to think through all the little things. And that's where we're trying. That comes from being well-fueled by practice, through preparation, from doing it over and over again. That provides endurance and lasting power in some of these things. But you've got to be able to make sure that we don't take that for granted. Now let's think about what it means, though. All of these things should be designed around the work of the Lord. Okay. The Lord, pretty easy in this context, is talking about the Lord? No, I want to know who the Lord is here. Okay, we got two choices. I'm gonna send A or B, guys. A or B. That's a very abnormal test for me. Is it the Father or the Son? Why, y'all are still quiet? Father. I did this. Oh, what does the context say? Look at verse 57, everybody. There we go. Just one verse back. The Lord was talking about the Lord Jesus Christ, and so contextually, then that's who he's talking about here. So your work of the Lord. Now that is the work for the Lord, the work that the Lord has called on you to do. Okay? It's not doing his work, that his work's done. He did his part. So we know that. So this is what we're to do. Now the word work, we have very specific ideas about what we think of work is. Right? It's got a very negative connotation. Work, that means you have to go and do stuff that's hard and unpleasant because you have to live. Okay. The word is, and because that's also, I think, one of the reasons why, besides others, that all of a sudden work is negatively taken doctrinally to say, no, work is a bad thing. Like people are conditioning, work is a bad thing. Faith is a good thing, work is a bad thing. No, both are good, dependent upon what you believe and what you're doing. We're doing the work of the Lord, what the Lord wants us doing. And the reasons why are found within the chapter. Here's all the things he did for you to make your resurrection possible through his. And so now he's tying this together of all the expectations going all the way back through this book of the activity. Okay, that's all the word means. Activity that you should be involved in. The word is ergonomics. Okay? That's what this is. Okay? Activity. What activity should you be involved in? Anything the Lord wants you involved in. So we tend to put this up, and here's what happens. We think of abounding in the work of the Lord as having signed up for certain things that happen here. And that is a flawed way of thinking about the work of the Lord. The activity of the Lord is to be the activity that characterizes your life, including when you're here, but especially when you're not. Are you somebody then, if we think about what the basic activities, core, we don't have any problem with these, core ideas of what we're to do as Christians. There are three categories, characterizations usually, of the work of the church, right? What are they? Evangelize, thank you. Edify and a noun, benevolence. Okay. Do good, right? Benevolence. You're to teach people, you're to teach people more, and you're to do good for people. And that needs to be what you are known for in life. And that we collectively are known for. We can combine our resources and our activity to do that as a unit, but it should also inform us that we are doing that as individuals. That's abounding. Not placing some kind of limitation on, I'm not in church mode right now. I know that that person isn't a Christian, but hey, I'm not in church mode right now. I know that my brother is hurting, just found out something, but I'm not in church mode right now. I know that something good could be done, but I'm not in church mode right now. And that's not what we ought to be about. Greg?
Even worse than that, in my opinion, even worse than that, we find out somebody is hurting or they're lacking, and we say, well, you know, have you signed up for that government program? You know, and we kind of shove it off, we kind of shove it off on welfare, you know, social welfare first before we even get involved.
Yeah, the key idea is, I mean, you're judging that because obviously they didn't have that in the first century, and so there was a greater need. But I want to address what he's pointing out here, is that when we get into that where it provides an excuse mentality, where our first thought is we don't have to. That's so different from abounding. And having an abounding mindset regarding to I'm active in the work of the Lord. Now, not everyone can do everything, right? Not everyone is well suited to do absolutely everything. We all have things we're better at, and you say, well, I can't do this. Okay, part of that's why we come together, is because other people can be part of that and fit in those weak areas. So I'm not good at finding people or meeting people, and okay, what can be your role in helping that person? Instead of, I can't do the meeting part and therefore I'm out, it becomes, I can't do that part, what can I do so I can be all in? Abounding in the work of the Lord. Greg? Yeah, it totally depends on where you are too. I mean, some people are going to be closer naturally, and some are going to be way removed. And you're trying to figure out then, how can we take advantage of the one who's close, and how can the person who's far removed make sure that they don't become kind of callous to it because they're not close to it, the situation. Okay, and it's overcoming all of that is what he is really accomplishing here at the end. He's had an opportunity, he's almost done. So this is his last kind of thing to say, okay, let's look back. You've got every reason now as a congregation to do all of this we've been talking about. So let's go. Okay, John? Yes. That's right. It's what can I do next is a good way to look at that, John. And that doesn't mean that you're always going to be able to do the same things either. Is you can't let I can't do the same thing I used to do be a reason not to do something at all. So we have to understand and be reasonable about it, but also not simply be excuse making in it. There are all sorts of ways to contribute. But we need to be working on ourselves in life to prepare us to contribute as a whole. That's when things can really come together. And sometimes it works the other way, that we need to work together to learn the lessons in life that we can do things on our own so that now we can apply it. So it's a cycle of the fact that you are my beloved brethren. It's a cycle of relationship that we help one another, we come together, and we leave stronger because of that. And because we become stronger as a result of doing that, we come back and we're stronger again. Heather. Mm-hmm. That's right. It always matters. Thank you for the segue into the last phrase. Knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. Now he switches words here. He moves from the word work to the word labor, which has a very specific connotation here. Okay, so if you're laboring, what does that mean? I thought I heard something. Working? Well, no, we're already working. Toil? What does toil mean? We can't just be swapping out our words. What do they mean? Though that's work. What next? There we go. This word, I'm not messing with you, I really am not. I need you to think through it. The word for labor, toil, the emphasis, they are related words. One is on activity generally. This word is on the effect. That is, it wears you out. So now remember, we're talking about the activity we're at abound in, and we talked about, we need to always refuel, but now we come back and we have something else though, and it says, knowing that your labor, that is, don't be surprised that it wears you out. Don't be surprised that there's an exhausting nature to being part of the work of the church, that can get to you. When he says knowing, is you should recognize this. Okay, this is an idea that you should recognize this from experience, that these kind of things happen. So you're simultaneously saying, I know I'm going to be worn out. This is going to be tiring. Okay, look at it that way. It's tiring. But you pair that with this next part, what it says is not in vain. Have you ever been doing something, you put all sorts of effort into it, and then right as you think you're at the end, something goes totally wrong, and whatever effort you have to start over? I think a lot of people have been. And that covers a lot of territory. I mean, you're working through on doing some kind of hard labor thing, and all of a sudden you realize you're dug in the wrong place. That's not a very good feeling. Or you've been working on something, you've been laying out something on your computer, and for those of you who are old enough to remember how often the blue screen of death would come along and decide that it wanted to make a visit. Those, during the 90s, no sermon was safe. That's what I'd tell people. No sermon is safe. Because at any moment, boom, and now I have to start over. Okay? So, aren't we thankful for autosave? Okay. But that's kind of the thing. You lose all that work. He's saying that when you are involved in the work of the church, in the work of the Lord, There's nothing that you're going to be doing when it is properly directed at what he wants you to do, and you put the right kind of effort into it for the right reasons, for the right thing, the right faith, there's always benefit. You, at the very least, are going to benefit from your involvement. You say, well, that person didn't obey the gospel. Did you learn better how to present the gospel? Is that soul now informed? And sometimes it may take a while. Somebody else might come along later and it come through because you did that first study. So somebody comes along and says, well, as a preacher, you go through and you're presenting lessons and trying to strengthen people and do stuff, and it may not come to fruition until after you've left that congregation. That you spent a number of years and it was just groundwork. Was it wasted? Well, no, it wasn't wasted. You just didn't see it. And the promise here of your involvement, don't start measuring everything in the work of the Lord by immediate returns. You have to be looking at the big picture, the long term, because that's who we're dealing with God. Okay, it's in here preparing for Judgment Day. Jesus died to prepare us for Judgment Day, and then tells us to get ready for Judgment Day. And that he's done what's necessary to keep us ready for Judgment Day. And that in between, what are we supposed to be doing? Working for him. Because your labor is not in vain in the Lord. In that arena, and in that relationship, there's always return on investment. Always. You will benefit. The Lord's church will benefit. Souls around you will benefit. We all together, working in these things, are going to benefit. Because the aim is right, the purpose is right, the foundation is right, and we are all doing it together right. And we ought to be able then to get some joy from the fact simply that we're working for the Lord. And we know in that moment, I've done what the Lord wanted me to do. We have to get away from this idea of that I have to get the result all the time I want. And instead, do the work that the Lord requires of me. That's the parable of the sower. And we need to be working in the Lord just as much as he was. We will start chapter 16 next week.